The galaxy had known peace for 3,000 years, but this peace did not come from friendship or understanding. It came from fear. Every species in the known universe feared one thing above all else. They feared the day when humans would wake up. Stood in the observation room of Moon Base 7. Through the large window, she could see Earth floating in the darkness of space. The blue planet looked peaceful from here, beautiful, but knew what slept beneath its surface. 10 billion humans rested in pods across the world. They had been sleeping for 3,000 years, and its job was to make sure they stayed asleep. She was a watcher, one of only 50,000 humans who remained awake across all human territories. The watchers did not fight. They did not build weapons. They simply watched and waited. They maintained the cities. They monitored the sleepers. And they prayed that no one would ever give humanity a reason to wake. Was young, only 28 years old. She had been born into this duty. Her mother was a watcher. Her grandmother was a watcher. For generations, her family had guarded the sleeping giants of Earth. She had never seen a human war. She had only read about them in the history files. Those files terrified her. Humans had fought among themselves for 10,000 years before the Great Sleep. They had invented weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. They had created poisons that could kill millions. They had built machines of war so terrible that other species refused to believe they were real. But the worst thing about humans was not their weapons. It was their minds. Humans never stopped thinking about war. Even in times of peace, they planned for conflict. They studied their enemies. They found weaknesses. They adapted and changed and evolved until nothing could stand against them. Every defeat made them stronger. Every victory made them more dangerous. When the Galactic Council first found Earth, they expected to find primitives, simple creatures on a small planet. What they found instead made them tremble. The Council sent observers to study human history. Those observers came back changed. They had seen what humans did to each other. They had seen the atomic bombs, the chemical weapons, the biological warfare. They had seen how humans could turn anything into a weapon, how they could fight in any environment, how they refused to surrender even when all hope was lost. The Council made a decision. Humanity must never be given a reason to fight among the stars. But humans surprised everyone. After their great unification war, something changed inside them. They looked at their bloody history and felt shame. They looked at the stars and saw new worlds to destroy, new species to conquer, new wars to fight. And they chose to stop. The Human Accord was signed 3,000 years ago. Humanity agreed to enter the long sleep. They would freeze themselves in pods and dream of peace. Only the Watchers would stay awake to maintain the technology and represent humanity at the Council. In exchange, the galaxy promised one thing: never give humanity a reason to wake. For 3,000 years, the accord held. Ambassador sat in his chair at the Galactic Council. He was old now, 112 years. His hair was white. His hands were thin, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He watched as the other species argued about trade routes and border disputes. The Empire wanted more territory. The Collective refused to give it. The smaller species tried to stay neutral. Said nothing. He never said anything at these meetings. He simply watched. The other ambassadors treated him strangely. Some him. Here was the representative of a sleeping species, a man who spoke for billions of dreamers. What power did he really have? Others feared him. They looked at and saw not an old man, but a trigger. One wrong move, one broken promise, and the sleepers would wake. The ambassador was speaking now. His name was difficult for humans to pronounce, so simply thought of him as the Loud One. They were a proud species. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had billions of soldiers. They believed themselves to be the greatest military power in the galaxy. Almost smiled at that thought. They had never fought humans. The meeting ended without resolution. It always did. Returned to his quarters and poured himself tea. He looked out at the stars and thought about Earth. He wondered if the sleepers dreamed. He wondered what they dreamed about. His communication device beeped. A message from Moon Base 7, from. Read the message 3 times. His hands did not shake, his face did not change. But inside, something cold settled in his stomach. Back on the moon, stared at her screens in disbelief. The transmission had come from the Outer Rim, a human research station called Hope's Landing. 17 watchers had been stationed there, scientists mostly. They studied distant stars and sent reports back to Earth. The warship had appeared without warning. It had opened fire on the station. The attack lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, Hope's Landing was debris floating in space. 17 humans were dead. His hands trembled as she sent the report to Ambassador. She knew what this meant. The accord had been broken. For the first time in 3,000 years, aliens had killed humans. She looked at the monitors. 10 million sleepers in her section alone, soldiers from the old wars, men and women who had fought in the Great Unification War. They had seen horrors that could not imagine. They had done things that kept her awake at night just reading about them. And now someone might have to wake them. Thought about the stories her grandmother told her, stories about what humans were like before the sleep. Her grandmother had met some of the soldiers when she was young. She said they were kind, gentle. They smiled and laughed and played with children. But her grandmother also said something else. She said that when those soldiers talked about war, their eyes changed. Something cold and ancient looked out from behind their smiles. Something that had been hunting and killing since humans first walked on Earth. Something that 3,000 years of sleep had not erased. Looked at the pods and whispered a prayer. She prayed that they would apologize. She prayed that they would make things right. Because if they did not, the sleepers would wake. And when humans woke up angry, galaxies burned. The stars outside her window twinkled peacefully. Somewhere out there, they were celebrating their easy victory. They did not know what they had done. They did not understand what was coming. But they would learn. Everyone always learned. The news spread through the Galactic Council like fire through dry grass. Every species heard about the attack on Hope's Landing. Every ambassador understood what it meant. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had broken the human accord. Old enemies suddenly stopped fighting. The and the had been arguing for centuries. Now they went silent. The smaller species pulled their fleets back to their home systems. Trade ships changed their routes to avoid human space. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting. Ambassador requested an emergency session of the council. He walked to the center of the great chamber and looked at the assembled species. His voice was calm and quiet. 17 of my people are dead, he said. They were scientists. They studied stars. They had no weapons. They were no threat to anyone. The ambassador stood up quickly. His scales were bright with agitation. This was a mistake, he declared. A rogue commander acted without orders. The Empire does not wish conflict with humanity. We will punish those responsible. Nodded slowly. Then you will hand over the commander and his crew for human justice. You will pay compensation to the families of the dead. And your emperor will publicly acknowledge that the Empire violated the accord. The chamber went silent. Every species knew what was asking. He was asking to admit weakness, to bow before a species that had slept for 3,000 years. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never bowed to anyone. The ambassador laughed. It was a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. You threaten us, with what? Your people sleep in their pods like bobbies. Your ships are ancient relics. Your weapons are museum pieces. The galaxy has grown strong while you dreamed human. Perhaps it is time you learned your place. Did not react to the insult. He simply looked at the ambassador with those calm, clear eyes. You have 30 standard days to meet our demands. Use them wisely. He walked out of the chamber without looking back. On Moon Base 7 received the authorization she had been dreading. The Council of Watchers had voted. The first awakening would begin. 100,000 soldiers would be brought out of sleep. The 6th Division, veterans of the Great Unification War, walked through the halls with heavy steps. The pods stretched out in endless rows, each one holding a sleeping human. These were not scientists or farmers or builders. These were warriors. They had fought in the bloodiest war in human history. They had killed millions of their own kind. And then, when the war ended, they had chosen to sleep rather than live with what they had done. She stopped at pod 677 for 9. Inside, a man slept peacefully. His face was young, frozen in time. His record said he was captain of the 14th Infantry. He had led soldiers in 12 major battles. He had never lost. Press the awakening sequence. The pod hummed. Lights flickered. Slowly, the ice around began to melt. His eyes opened. For a long moment, simply stared at the ceiling. His mind was trying to catch up with his body. The last thing he remembered was entering this pod. His wife had been there. She had kissed his forehead and told him to dream of peace. He had closed his eyes, expecting to open them in a better world. "Captain," said softly, "can you hear me?" He turned his head slowly. A young woman in a watcher uniform stood beside his pod. She looked nervous, scared even, tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Handed him water. He drank it slowly. "How long?" he finally asked. 3,000 years, sir." Closed his eyes. 3,000 years. Everyone he knew was dead. His friends, his family, his. He whispered, "My wife, what happened to her?" Hesitated. She had read his file she knew about. "She became a watcher, sir. She refused to sleep. She wanted to be here when you woke up." Paused. "She died 2,000 years ago. Old age. She spent her whole life watching over you." Did not cry. He did not scream. He simply lay there in silence, letting the information settle into his bones. 2,000 years. Had waited for 2,000 years, and he had never woken up. She had grown old watching his frozen face. She had died alone. "Why?" he asked. "Why am I awake now?" Told him everything. The attack. The 17 dead watchers. The broken accord. The ultimatum. As she spoke, she watched his face carefully. She had been told that the old soldiers were dangerous, that something lived inside them that normal humans did not have. She saw it now. As she described the attack, something changed in his eyes. The grief was still there. The pain was still there. But something else rose up behind them, something cold and patient and absolutely terrifying. They said slowly, "Tell me about them." Pulled up the files on her tablet. She showed him their empire. 400 star systems, billions of soldiers, thousands of warships, technology far beyond what humanity had possessed before the sleep. Studied the information carefully. He asked questions. What were their tactics? How did they supply their fleets? What species had they conquered? How did those species fight back? Answered as best she could. She noticed that never asked about weapons or ships. He did not seem interested in their strength. He only wanted to know their habits, their patterns, their thinking. "They believe they are strong," said finally. "They have won many wars. They think winning is normal." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They have never lost. They do not know how to lose. That is their weakness." Felt a chill run down her spine. "Sir, they have billions of soldiers. We are waking 100,000. Sat up slowly. His muscles ached from 3,000 years of stillness, but his mind was clear, sharp, ready. "Numbers do not win wars," he said. "Will wins wars. The side that refuses to break, refuses to surrender, refuses to die, that side wins. They have never faced an enemy like that." He looked at with those cold, ancient eyes. "They have never faced humans." Across the moon base, 100,000 pods were opening. 100,000 soldiers were waking up. They learned about the attack. They learned about the ultimatum. They learned that they had laughed at humanity. None of them asked if they could win. None of them worried about the numbers. They simply asked one question, the same question that had asked, Where are they? The 30 days began to count down. They did not respond to the ultimatum. Their emperor believed that humanity was bluffing. What could 100,000 soldiers do against billions? He was about to find out. The galaxy watched as humanity began to move for the first time in 3,000 years. It was like watching a sleeping giant stretch its arms. Everyone held their breath. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. Lieutenant led a team of 12 soldiers into space. Their mission was not to fight. Not yet. Their mission was to watch and learn. Had been a scout in the old wars. She knew how to move without being seen. She knew how to find information that enemies wanted to hide. Her ship was small and fast. It had no weapons. It did not need weapons, was not here to destroy anything. She was here to understand. For 2 weeks she moved through territory like a ghost. She watched their fleets practice battle formations. She listened to their communications. She studied their supply lines, their patrol routes, their command structures. Everything she learned, she sent back to the awakened commanders on Earth. Notice something interesting. They were confident, too confident. Their formations were predictable. Their communications were not encrypted well. Their patrols followed the same routes every day. They had been winning wars for so long that they had forgotten how to be careful. She reported this to Captain. They fight the same way every time, she said. They have a pattern. They never change it because it always works. Nodded slowly. Then we will make it stop working. On Mars, the old shipyards came back to life. Engineer walked through the massive hangars where human warships had slept for 3,000 years. They called these ships museum pieces. They laughed at human technology, but was not laughing. He had studied these ships before the sleep. He knew every system, every weapon, every capability. These ships were not advanced by modern standards, but they were built by humans, and humans built things to last. His team worked day and night. They did not try to build new ships. There was no time for that. Instead, they improved what they had. They studied the technology that his team had observed. They found weaknesses. They found ways to exploit those weaknesses. Within 2 weeks, the old ships had new shields based on stolen designs. Within 3 weeks, they had weapons that could punch through armor. The museum pieces were becoming something else, something dangerous. Looked at the finished fleet and smiled. Let them laugh now, he whispered. At the Galactic Council, strange reports began to arrive. A military base had lost all its computer systems overnight. No attack, no invasion. The systems simply stopped working. Human hackers had found a way inside. A weapons factory exploded. Investigation showed that the machines had been to destroy themselves. No one knew how. 3 generals received messages containing their own private conversations from years ago, secrets they thought were safe, plans they thought were hidden. The messages came with a simple note: "We are watching." The other species at the council began to understand something. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not simply build bigger armies and stronger weapons. They attacked everything. They attacked your computers. They attacked your economy. They attacked your secrets. They attacked your mind. The ambassador spoke privately with, "How may we assist?" he asked. They had been enemies of the for centuries. They saw an opportunity. Smiled politely. "Thank you, but no. This is a human matter. We will handle it ourselves." The ambassador looked confused. "But you are so few, and they are so many. Surely you need allies." Shook his head. "You misunderstand. We do not need help to defeat them. We need to be careful not to defeat them too quickly. If we destroy them completely, other species might become afraid. They might think humans are too dangerous to exist. We must win, but we must win in a way that shows we are not monsters." The ambassador stared at. This old man was not worried about losing. He was worried about winning too hard. On Earth, Elder Myra addressed the Council of Watchers. She was 400 years old, the oldest human alive. She had been born after the sleep began, but she remembered stories from those who had lived before. "You young ones do not understand what we are waking," she said. Her voice was thin but strong. "You have read the histories, you have seen the numbers, but you do not know what it felt like." She looked at the assembled watchers with ancient eyes. "Before the sleep, I met some of the soldiers. They were kind people, they smiled, they laughed, they played games with children, but when they talked about war, something changed. Their eyes became different, cold, empty, like looking into a deep hole with no bottom." Myra paused. "We humans invented war. We perfected it. We turned it into a science, an art, a way of life. For 10,000 years, we killed each other with increasing skill. Every weapon, every tactic, every strategy that exists in this galaxy, we invented first. We used it on ourselves before anyone else even existed." She stood up slowly. "They think they understand war because they have conquered weak species. They do not understand. War is not about ships and soldiers. War is about will. It is about who wants victory more. It is about who is willing to suffer more, sacrifice more, endure more." Her voice grew hard. "No species in this galaxy has suffered like humans. No species has sacrificed like humans. No species has endured like humans. They have never lost because they have never faced an enemy that refused to stop fighting. They are about to meet that enemy now." The deadline passed. The Emperor did not respond to the ultimatum. He believed that humanity was weak. He believed that 3,000 years of sleep had made them soft. He believed that his billions of soldiers would crush the 100,000 awakened humans like insects. Received new orders. The second awakening would begin. 500,000 more soldiers, the strategists, the tacticians, the ones who had ended the great unification war not with weapons, but with plans so perfect that the enemy surrendered rather than face what was coming. As the pods opened across Earth and its colonies, thought about Elder Myra's words. She thought about the cold eyes of Captain. She thought about what humans were capable of when they stopped being peaceful. They believed they were starting a small conflict, a quick war against a sleeping species. They would teach humanity a lesson and return to their normal lives. They did not understand. This was not going to be a war. This was going to be an education, and humans were very good teachers. The First Fleet was already moving toward human space, 10,000 warships, the largest force they had ever assembled. The commander was confident. How could he not be? He had numbers, he had technology, he had power. He had no idea what was waiting for him. The fleet jumped into human space with absolute confidence. 10,000 warships moved in perfect formation toward station. The fleet commander stood on his bridge and smiled. This would be easy. The humans had only a handful of ships, old ships, weak ships. The battle would be over in minutes. Admiral watched the fleet on her tactical display. She sat calmly in her command chair drinking tea. Around her, officers moved quietly, preparing for battle. No one panicked. No one shouted. They had all done this before. Was 108 years old when she entered sleep. She had commanded ships in 17 battles during the Great Unification War. She had never lost, not because she was lucky, not because she had better ships. She won because she understood one simple truth. Victory came to those who controlled the fight. "How many ships do we have?" her first officer asked. 47, replied. "And they have 10,000. Nodded, "Yes, they are badly outnumbered." Her first officer stared at her. Then he laughed. The crew laughed with him. They understood what meant. Numbers meant nothing if you could not use them. The fleet approached in standard formation. 3 lines of ships, the biggest in the center, the smaller ones on the sides. It was a formation they had used for centuries. It had won them dozens of wars. Why change something that worked? Saw the formation and smiled. She had studied tactics for decades before the sleep. She knew this formation. She knew its strengths. More importantly, she knew its weaknesses. "Signal the fleet," she said. "Execute Pattern 7. 47 human ships scattered in all directions. To the commander, it looked like chaos. It looked like the humans were running away in panic. He ordered his fleet to pursue. That was his first mistake. The formation broke apart as different ships chased different targets. The careful lines dissolved into a mess of individual vessels. Each captain thought they were chasing an easy kill. They did not realize they were being led into a trap. Waited until the fleet was completely scattered. Then she gave her next order. Execute Pattern 3, target their command ships. The 47 human ships suddenly stopped running. They turned and struck like wolves attacking a herd, but they did not attack randomly. They attacked specific targets: communication ships, command vessels, supply carriers. Every shot was precise. Every target was chosen for a reason. The commander tried to reorganize his fleet, but his communication ships were burning. His orders were not getting through. Each captain was fighting alone, making their own decisions, getting in each other's way. Had taken 10,000 ships and turned them into 10,000 individual problems. Problems that could not coordinate. Problems that could not support each other. Problems that died one by one. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 38 human ships remained. 0 ships survived. The news reached the Galactic Council within hours. Every species heard the numbers: 10,000 against 47. The humans had lost 9 ships. They had lost everything. The ambassador could not believe it. He requested the battle recordings. He watched them again and again. He saw how the humans had moved, how they had thought, how they had turned the strength into weakness. "This is not possible," he whispered. "No one fights like this." But the recordings did not lie. The humans had done the impossible, and they had made it look easy. Across the galaxy, species that had considered supporting the quietly changed their minds. Species that had ignored the conflict suddenly paid attention. Everyone understood now. The human accord was not about protecting the galaxy from human weapons. It was about protecting the galaxy from human minds. Corporal sat in his quarters on a transport ship. He was young, only 22 when he entered sleep. He had been a soldier in the last year of the Great Unification War. He had seen things that still haunted him. He pulled out his journal and began to write. "They call us monsters," he wrote. "The aliens look at us with fear in their eyes. They think we are death itself walking among them. Maybe they are right. Maybe there is something broken inside us, something that makes us good at killing." He paused and thought about his family. His mother and father dead for 3,000 years. His little sister who had cried when he entered the pod. She was dust now. Everyone he loved was dust. "But we are not fighting because we love war," he continued. "We are fighting because 17 of us died while we slept. We trusted the galaxy to keep its promise. We chose peace. We chose to dream instead of destroy, and they killed us anyway." He looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, they were learning what it meant to wake humanity. "We are not monsters. We are simply very, very awake." The Emperor received the news in his throne room. He did not believe it at first. He demanded confirmation. When confirmation came, he sat in silence for a long time. His advisors told him to surrender. They told him the humans would show mercy if he apologized. They told him the war was already lost. The Emperor refused. He was proud. His empire had never surrendered to anyone. He would not be the first emperor to bow before another species. He ordered total mobilization. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon. 60 billion soldiers answered the call. 15,000 warships launched from worlds. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Surely this would be enough. Surely the humans could not defeat such numbers. Captain reviewed the intelligence reports on the mobilization. He studied the numbers carefully. 60 billion soldiers, 15,000 ships, everything the Empire had. His officers waited for his reaction. They expected him to be worried. They expected him to call for more reinforcements, more awakening, more preparation. Instead, simply shook his head. "Not enough," he said quietly. His officers exchanged glances. Not enough. They had mobilized their entire civilization. They had more soldiers than humans had ever had in all of history. How could it not be enough? Saw their confusion. He understood it. They were thinking about numbers, about ships and soldiers and weapons. They were thinking like the war is not about numbers, explained. It is about breaking the enemy's will to fight. They have never had their will broken. They do not know how to keep fighting when everything seems lost. When their fleets fail, when their planets fall, when their people despair, they will shatter. All those billions of soldiers will mean nothing when they lose hope. He stood up and looked at the star map. The empire stretched across 400 systems. It had taken them thousands of years to build. "We will not destroy their army," said. "We will destroy their belief that they can win, and then the army will destroy itself." The final campaign was about to begin, and they, for all their numbers and all their power, had no idea what was coming. The final campaign took 11 days, not 11 months, not 11 years, 11 days. In less than 2 weeks, the greatest empire in the galaxy fell apart like in a storm. Humanity did not conquer the empire. They dismantled it, piece by piece, system by system, not with overwhelming force but with overwhelming intelligence. Every fleet that moved to attack was already expected. Human scouts had mapped their movements. Human hackers had stolen their orders. When they arrived to fight, the humans were not there. They were somewhere else, attacking supply lines, destroying fuel depots, cutting communication cables. They could not catch the human ships. The humans were always one step ahead, always in the wrong place at the wrong time for the... It was like fighting smoke. Every time they grabbed at their enemy, their hands closed on nothing. But the military defeats were not the worst part. The worst part was everything else. On the third day, the banking system crashed. Every account frozen. Every transaction stopped. Billions of citizens could not buy food. Factories could not pay workers. The economy died in hours. On the fifth day, vassal species began to revolt. For centuries, they had been conquered and controlled. Now human diplomats offered them a choice. Rise up against your masters and humanity would support their freedom. Stay loyal to the, and humanity would remember. 12 vassal species chose freedom. 12 new rebellions exploded across the empire. The military, already struggling to fight the humans, now had to fight their own subjects. On the seventh day, the truth came out. Human propaganda specialists broadcast recordings across the empire, recordings of atrocities, evidence of massacres, proof of crimes that the empire had hidden for centuries. The people saw what their leaders had done. Many refused to believe it, but many more did believe. Protests erupted on worlds. Citizens demanded peace. Soldiers questioned their orders. The empire was not falling to human weapons. It was falling to human ideas. General commanded all awakened human forces. He was old and tired. He had fought in the Great Unification War when he was young. He had hoped never to fight again. But when the accord was broken, he had woken up and done his duty. On the 10th day, he received a message from the emperor. The emperor requested a meeting. He wanted to discuss terms. Agreed. He traveled to a neutral station in unclaimed space. The emperor was waiting for him in a small conference room. The alien looked broken. His scales had lost their color. His eyes were empty. They sat across from each other, in silence for a long moment. "How?" the emperor finally asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "You were asleep. We had 3,000 years to advance. We had billions of soldiers, the greatest fleet ever assembled. How did you defeat us in 11 days? Considered the question carefully. He had thought about this answer for a long time. "You spent 3,000 years building a bigger army," he said. You conquered species. You collected ships. You counted your soldiers and believed the numbers made you strong. He leaned forward. We spent 3,000 years sleeping, but before that we spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. Every war in our history taught us something. Every defeat made us stronger. Every victory made us more dangerous. The emperor shook his head. But we studied your history, we saw your wars, we learned from them. No, said, you read about our wars. That is not the same as living them. You learned what we did. You did not learn why we did it. You did not understand how we think. He stood up and walked to the window. Stars glittered in the darkness. Humans do not fight to win battles. We fight to win wars. A battle is just one moment. A war is everything. Economy, politics, psychology, culture, information. We attack all of it. We never stop. We never rest. We adapt to every situation. We find weakness where others see strength. He turned back to the emperor. You looked at our numbers and thought you understood. You saw 100,000 soldiers and believed you knew what you faced. You did not. You faced 10,000 years of human warfare. You faced every lesson we ever learned. You faced the combined knowledge of a species that turned killing into a science. The emperor was silent for a long time. Then he asked, "What are your terms?" The terms were absolute. The military would be disbanded. Every soldier would return home. Every warship would be destroyed. The commanders responsible for the attack on Hope's Landing would be tried and executed. Reparations would be paid to the families of the 17 dead Watchers. The Empire would become a protectorate under Galactic Council supervision. The Emperor signed the surrender without argument. He had no choice. His empire was already ashes. And then humanity did something that surprised everyone. They went back to sleep. Stood in the hall of Moon Base 7. Captain lay in his pod, ready for the long sleep once more. He looked different now. His face had new lines. His eyes had new shadows. The war had changed him. "Do you think they will learn?" asked. "The other species, do you think they will remember?" Thought about the question. He thought about waiting for him for 2,000 years. He thought about the 17 Watchers who died on Hope's Landing. He thought about all the soldiers who had woken up, fought, and now prepared to sleep again. "They will remember for a while," he said finally. "Maybe 1,000 years, maybe 2,000, then they will forget. They always forget." He smiled, but there was sadness in it. "And then, if needed, we will wake again." The pod sealed. Ice began to form around him. His eyes closed. Returned to her station. She looked at her monitors, at the millions of sleepers under her care. The galaxy was quiet again. The other species had returned to their normal lives, their arguments, their small conflicts, their petty wars. But now they whispered a warning to their children. They told stories about the sleeping giants of Earth. They taught their young ones to never disturb humanity's rest. Ambassador returned to the Galactic Council. He took his usual seat. He said nothing. He simply watched as the other species discussed trade routes and border disputes. The ambassador's seat was empty now. The Empire had fallen. Their voice no longer mattered. The other ambassadors glanced at nervously. They remembered what humanity had done. They remembered how quickly the greatest empire in the galaxy had been destroyed. They remembered that was not just an old man in a chair. He was a trigger, a warning, a reminder of what slept behind him. In the cities of Earth, 10 billion humans dreamed. They dreamed of peace, of worlds without war, of a future where they would never need to wake up angry again. The galaxy watched them sleep and prayed. Because now everyone understood the truth. The human accord was not a treaty. It was not an agreement. It was a mercy. Humanity had chosen to sleep because they knew what they were capable of. They had looked at their bloody history and decided to stop. They had given the galaxy a gift. The gift was their absence. And all anyone had to do to keep that gift was follow one simple rule: never wake the humans. The stars continued to shine. The ships continued to fly. Life continued across 1,000 worlds. And somewhere on Earth, in a pod beneath the frozen ground, Captain dreamed of his wife. He dreamed of peace. He dreamed of a universe where humans never had to fight again. It was a beautiful dream. The galaxy hoped it would last forever.